Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're doing the Booktube Newbie Tag, which means that I'm going to answer to 10-ish different questions about me so that you can get to know me better as a reader, a booktuber, and incidentally, as an author too. Most of the booktuber I follow religiously weekly, they have done this tag and they have take the time to answer to those 10 or 11 questions. The original video is not uploaded anymore. I've found the prompt with the 7 original questions because the original video was a little bit shorter, and the actual, the modern one with 10 or 11 questions on the fandom app, which has a link to that original video, but that video is now private, so I don't know who to credit for the original idea of this one. But as I told you, all the other booktubers I follow weekly, and most of them publish 2 or 3 videos every week, unlike myself. At some point I've done this so that I have actually a pretty clear idea of the person, of the bookish person they are, and that is actually really intriguing for me. And I decided to do something like that to answer those questions so that you can know me better on the reader side of things, on the new booktuber side of things. And as I told you, as an author myself, I'm going to cheat a little bit and talk to you about my books too. And let's see how it turns out, if it's actually enjoyable. First question is pretty straightforward. Why did you start this channel? And the answer is, I've been following Booktube since 2012, I think, 2013 maybe. Yeah. In a moment when I was already a pretty strong reader. I had a pretty decent career reading mostly science fiction and a little bit of epic fantasy, but I didn't know something like that existed. A place like Booktube in this case, and the Bookstagram later, when I could share my reading experience with other people. I lived in a very small city in Sicily, and by my accent you may understand that I am Italian. I'm trying to practice my English too, and most of the stuff I read was in Italian. When I stumbled on English literature, especially fantasy book, it started with the Six of Crows duologies, Six of Crows and Crypt Kingdom, which I have behind me somewhere there. I bought those books because they looked pretty. I was already pretty decent by Italian standards, speaking English and reading English, and just because I love the language. I love how it sounds, and I really enjoy listening to people speaking English, American English and British English too, Aussie, Canadian, everything. But it was a real challenge to properly start to read a 500 pages book or more, like that one. So I kept that book in my library for maybe 1 year or more. Same thing happened with the Illumine, Gemina and the Obsidio trilogy. I bought those in English. There were no Italian translation for those. They simply looked pretty and I enjoyed having them on my library. Then one day I finally decided to start reading and my brain exploded because, as I told you, you can think you're a very good reader, and you may think you have a decent pronunciation and you have a decent understanding to be knowledgeable about a language, but the day you start reading novels in that language, everything changes. So I was searching for reviews about Crypt Kingdom, Six of Crows, and the Illuminate trilogy reviews on the internet, and most of those reviews, of course, were from American people or British people. There were a few reviews from Italian people reading those books in English, but most of the others were in English, of course. And then bam, I stumbled on YouTube and I discovered the Booktube. So actually, the Booktube has been with me for most of the last decade. I watch Booktube videos every day, and it's been a huge factor in pushing me to be an author myself. I know AuthorTube is another thing. It's pretty different from the actual Booktube because they are two different things. So I started to follow authors who shared their experience being author themselves, reader themselves, and trying to use Booktube as a platform. But I never tried to use Booktube as a platform to market my books in Italy, just because Italian Booktube is not that huge in Italy. There are a few very big channels and a plethora or other really small channels. But I started to use Instagram and the Bookstagram to market my books eventually, many years later. So just to wrap it up, I started to think about doing a Booktube channel because Booktube has been an integral part of my life for almost a decade. And at some point I decided to be part of that crowd of people who share their experience on Booktube, because I think that I have a slightly different reading taste compared to most of the other booktubers. I like many of the very popular Booktube series and books that have been exploding on Booktube. But most of the thing I like, they're not mentioned, they're not discussed, they're not part of the Booktube discussion. So perhaps the stuff I read, which are not extremely popular, will be something that may interest you. They could be part of your reading journey too. They could be interesting for you too. And of course, eventually, when I get to do it, when I'm ready, I'll talk to you about my books too. But it's not something that will happen extremely soon. Aside a few things I will tell you during one of the other answers, because I have to tell you to be sincere and honest about that. The second question is, what are a few fun and unique things you can bring to the Booktube community? And I think most of this question you got the answer in the first one, actually. As I told you, I think I have a slightly different reading taste when it regarding of the book I select every month to read. My reading tastes have been evolving during the last 5 or 6 years. They drastically changed when I became an author, because it changes the quantity, the amount of time I can spend reading. So I try to be pretty selective, because I know I have a low amount of energy and brain power to use for reading, which is make me extremely sad, because I love writing, but I love reading too. And when I'm writing, I cannot read, and when I read, I cannot write. So it's a conundrum, right? So yeah, reading taste most of all, and then being an author, I can give you a slightly different point of view when I review books. Now, I try to switch off my author brain when I read books, because otherwise I will enjoy absolutely nothing. Because my editor mind, because every author in some way, even if we are not professional editors, because that's another job, that's different, we acquire skills from that kind of job by sheer experience, by writing books. So when we read a book, when we try to enjoy a novel, sometimes or most time, our author brain will switch on. We will try to dissect that book, trying to understand what worked and what didn't work, and why we are enjoying it and why we are not enjoying it. And that can mess up with our perception of the sheer enjoyment of the book, and that can change the way we are actually able to write a proper review that will be understandable for readers. So I try to switch off that side of my brain when I read and review books, because as I told you, otherwise I will be grumpy all the day and actually not enjoying even the most perfect and the most amazing book everyone loves. Yeah, that is why I've been so unpopular on Bookstagram, because of my views about pretty famous author. Yeah. So yes, reading taste, it's something different. I try to go and search for indie gems, pretty unknown author, pretty niche authors. I like to be on board and be part of the enthusiasm for the beginning of the writing and publishing journey of an author. It makes me feel accomplished. It makes me feel useful. I like to help new and upcoming authors to make a name for themselves. And of course, if I enjoyed my experience with the reading their books, I'll be the first one trying to back them up, to be part of the crowd and to be there on the first line cheering them up. And even if I try to switch off my author brain, I'm pretty sure I can give you a very reliable idea of a book when I give you a review. And on a side note, I talked about this in my previous video. I don't review books I don't like, because if I don't like a book, I don't finish it. If I'm not actually enjoying a book, I don't finish it. I DNF it. If I DNF it, I don't think I'm entitled to leave a review. I'm not a person that leaves a book at 20-25% and gives it a 1-star review, because I didn't read the whole things. Maybe the final part is amazing. Maybe if I have the guts or the patience to get to finish the book, I will give it the 5 stars. But for me, as an author and as a reader, if a book is not engaging during the first 50%, it's a huge failure. So I don't give it a review. I don't feel ashamed if I don't finish a book. I'm too old to do things I don't want to do. And that's especially true for books, which are so integral to my being, to the person I am. So yes, to try and summarize that, my reading tastes are different, and my review are pretty detailed and pretty heartfelt, and I think just by listening or to watching to my review or of reading them on Goodreads and on my Instagram page, you will have a pretty clear idea of why a book could be for you or not. And if I tell you you should give a shot of a book, I'll do it wholeheartedly. So I hope that in time you will learn to trust me. Trust my reviews too. Third question is, what are you most excited for about this new channel? And it is actually the kind of people I can reach. As I told you, I have a pretty decently followed Bookstagram profile. But the people I can interact are mostly Italian people, and of course people who are interested in my books and in Italian reader who actually read English stuff or British stuff or American stuff. So it is a pretty niche audience, and I'm pretty pumped about this Booktube channel because it is completely directed to English reading, English readers, English written stuff readers. So people from all around the world who are interested in stuff directed to international audiences. So yeah, yes, I see social media and the Booktube especially as a way to connect with other readers and to connect with other authors too. So I think it will be easier to share all the books I read from American, British and Australian authors from all around the world. And because there is this gap, this huge difference between the amount of people I can reach in Italy who are actually interested in international literature written in English, and people who, like me, that actually read books in English every day because it's their mother language, the language they use every day, or it is because they simply like to read stuff in English. And as I told you, I began to read stuff in English because I had American books in my library or from Australian authors in my library. But I actually enjoy it a little bit more than reading stuff in Italian, even translated American, British, international books translating in Italian, because the original stuff sometimes it's better. And I'm not throwing any shade to translators because I will be in that category myself in the future, because I'm working on the translation of my books for the international audience. So if you read in English, there's a good chance you will be able to put your hands on my books too. But summarize this, is the people, is the ability to connect with other people that love the same thing I love, in love with fantasy books, science fiction books, indie books, self-published books. And I'm pretty eager to connect with others. It is actually already happening. My channel is infinitely small, it's tiny, teeny tiny, but the interaction I had here on Booktube and on Twitter too, when I try to share my videos and talk and connect with the authors I mentioned, all of those interaction have been amazing, and I hope there will be more and more, day by day, month by month, and by putting out all of my views and my love for science fiction and fantasy book. I'm pretty sure that my bookish family will be bigger and bigger and bigger. The next question is, why do you love reading? And this is the big one. This is the huge one. Yeah, I love reading because I am an extremely introvert person. I am what many would call a high efficiency introverted person, which means that I'm extremely capable of interact with everyone, strangers, co-worker. I was extremely capable to interact with my classmates at school, and I can do it, but I don't want to do it. So it is extremely painful to be in a crowded place for me. It drains all of my energy. It makes me feel sick. And in time, with years, year by year, and growing older, I became even more proficient in managing my interaction with others. So even if I'm pretty efficient at that, it hasn't become less painful and hard to do it for me. But living a sheltered life, so trying to have a pretty exact control of the amount of interaction I have with people, even with family members, of course, too bad. It has the consequence that you cut yourself from external stimuli and you may lose contact with reality, actually. So literature for me, especially fantasy and science fiction book, is an exercise in empathy. It makes me able to manage better my empathy. Being an introvert and being an extremely empathetic person, every interaction in person, it hits me like a truck. It is very painful for me to manage the way I can read people. I can read people's emotions and feelings. So by reading the author point of view about people's emotion, and the way of thinking of other people, of course, those are fictional characters, but those fictional characters, they always come from the actual experience from the others. So when they speak about a certain kind of behavior, certain kind of characters, they must have been taking inspiration from something real. The way they manage those, the way their characters and protagonists react to those other characters, the way they take decisions, the way they decide to live their life, helps me manage the way I interact with other peoples, because most of the time those characters are doing stuff I will do and taking decision I can understand, but many times they do something I don't expect and they take decision I don't actually understand on the moment. And if the novel is properly written, if it is compelling, and if it has a good character work, it will show me the thinking, all the chain reaction of the brain, what's happening inside those minds, and it will show me a different way to approach a problem. Of course, in my real life, I will not go around slaying dragons, but I will face personal issues that many of the best authors have been writing in those books. So yeah, literature for me is a way to live a different life from mine, but they're a way to understand how to make wise decision and how to deal with the wrong decision I have made in my life too. I like tormented characters who have a different past. They are struggling with a difficult life and the way they try to overcome all of the obstacles they have to face day by day. So yeah, it is empathy training for me to manage my ability to control myself and to manage my ability to relate to others in a healthy way. And of course, it's a way to enjoy myself, to live in a slightly more interesting world than this one, because the world outside can be really beautiful, really, really amazing. I can meet really amazing people. But come on, Randland is another thing. The Middle Earth is another thing. Even when the world and the world building, when that kind of world I'm reading, it's not that beautiful, like Roshar, for example, but it can be really interesting and really different from my trivial everyday life. So that's why I'm reading. I need to read, otherwise I go crazy. Question number 5. What book series got you into reading? So, to be precise, to be honest, I have 2 different life as a reader, because there was a huge gap between when I was 21 to 30, 32. When I actually was reading barely anything. I was more of a gamer guy, more interested in Xbox video games than reading, and cinema too. I still am a huge movie buff, but not that huge as I was a decade ago. So originally, when I was about 11, 12, the first book series that got me into reading was the Dragonlance series, with the book 1, the one of Autumn Twilight, I think, and said it right. I have the Italian title pretty clear in my mind. I don't remember the original title in English. So, but the first Dragonlance trilogy, I still remember all the visual in my mind, the way my mind was creating this huge Hollywood blockbuster in my mind. I don't think those books aged that well, because I tried to reread them a couple of years ago and I was thoroughly disappointed, but I still hold those fond memories, so I still love them. That was the first one, and then when I was around 14, I discovered science fiction, and I switched to mainly to science fiction for a couple of years, reading all the classics. Asimov, the Robot series book, the Foundation, the Empire books, and all the books from the Golden Age era, because there was an imprint in Italy. They were publishing all of those great classic from the Golden Age of science fiction, books written in the 50s or in the 60s. They were extremely cheap. They were all amazing for me. Alfred and Elton van Vogt especially, and Heinlein, and all of those. Huge author for that time. So for a couple of years, I've been reading just those, and then when I was 16, I read Magician from Raymond E. Feist, and that destroyed my mind in the best way possible. I discovered epic fantasy, and I discovered the sheer power of that kind of huge brick of a book that can rework and rewire your brain and change the way you see the world. So yeah, that's the first part, the initial part. And then as an adult, I was mainly interested in techno-thriller. Michael Crichton especially, and everything that was around that kind of science fiction, modern science fiction, which was actually more of a thriller, and then with a little bit of science fiction. During those years, I've become obsessed with cyberpunk, of course, with Gibson mainly, and New Romance and all that stuff. And then, as I told you, around a decade ago, maybe a little less, I discovered modern fantasy books, modern science fiction books, and that's around the same time when I decided that all the stories I had in my mind, they were worth it to be written down, they were worth telling and shared with the world. So by now, I think that my favorite author now is Robin Hobb. I've just finished reading the first Farseer trilogy. I'm ready to embark in the next trilogy, and I think she's in an ex aequo first position with Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time series. And of course, in my mind and in my soul, there's enough space to have more than one author in the first place. And the Expanse series is something that I dearly love. So those are the different stages of my reading journey and the different influence I have for my writing journey too. So yeah, by now, if I have to be completely honest, those three authors are the one that changed my mind forever. So Robin Hobb, Robert Jordan, and the Corey, the duo who wrote the Expanse series of book and the TV show. The next question is, what question would you ask to other booktubers, to your favorite booktubers? The main one is suggestions about how to manage time. Because recording videos and editing videos is extremely difficult for me. I am becoming more comfortable speaking in front of a web camera like this. I know I need a better one. I have to buy a camera. No, one day I will do. But editing videos and trying to make them efficient and pleasurable to watch, that's extremely difficult for me. Thankfully, most of my favorite booktubers are pretty open about this, and they have actually videos on their channel about how they produce their video and how do they manage their time. So most of them unknowingly answered to my question about this. Number 7 is, what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? Of course, for me, it's the language. It is actually, having this channel, it is actually a very good way for me to practice, because even if I love the language, even if I read a ton of books in English, if you don't practice a language, if you don't speak to someone, you will lose it. You will forget the words. You will lose the ability to properly articulate sentences. So yes, my main struggle with this is the language, even if I love it so much. But another struggle would be time management, because for me I have to juggle my everyday work, my activity as an author, trying to manage my Bookstagram channel, and to find interesting topics to discuss here on Booktube. And of course, I'm actually translating my books for the international markets, so that's another thing to think about. But I think that the barrier language will become easier and easier to overcome in time, because I've been working with American people for a lot of years. I'm an advertisement art director, so most of my job it's been dealing with strangers, with people who actually speak English. And when I was actively speaking with my clients in English every day, my English was better. And when I stopped doing that every day and I become a freelancer, I immediately backtracked and I become worse and worse and worse. So by now, by trying to speak English weekly while recording my videos, I think I will become better and the struggle will become easier to overcome. Hopefully. Number 8 is, when did you start reading? I told you it was around 11, 12. Where do you read? Now I have a pretty nice setup on my desk. I try not to read in bed, because if I'm in bed, I'm sleeping. I'm a huge fan of sleeping. I can take my eyes open if I'm in bed. I love sleeping. Even if I have my ebook reader on my bed, I can read just a few pages and then I immediately log out and go to sleep. And same thing about reading on a comfortable armchair on a sofa. It's too relaxing. I get sleepy. So I read on my desk. I have a reading lamp. I have background music. Actually, that's how maniacal I can be. I'm a maniac about this. I read on the same setup when I write. So I have my monitor, my PC monitor, with picture about my headcanon. So if I'm reading The Way of Kings, for example, or from Brandon Sanderson, I put an on-screen picture about with fan arts, with characters, with places, and with maps, so I can visualize better what I'm doing. And then I have, of course, background music. I type World of Radiance ambience music, and I put those playlists on and on when I'm reading. So that's a perfect way for me to keep my mind focused and properly give those books the attention they deserve. And then of course I have my pencil, my stickers when I take notes, especially when I'm reading The Wheel of Time with that huge amount of characters. I always have to take notes, not on the book, on other pages, on my block notes, to try to remember places, people, interconnection, backstories, and all the rest. I try to be the most thorough and try to pay those books all the huge amount of attention they deserve. Of course, I read more like light-hearted books, and I don't need to take notes and all the rest. But I always like to have a setting that when I don't get too relaxed, when it doesn't happen that I read a couple of pages and then I have to go back because my mind was going somewhere else. That will for sure happen if I try to read in bed or on a sofa or on a comfy chair. So yes, I try to pay attention and to be in a place when I don't have external stimuli, putting the phone in plane mode. Yeah, so probably will show you my setup on Instagram. So go follow me on Instagram too. My reading setup is waiting for you. Number 10 is, what kind of books do you like to read? So, about the genre, I'm mainly a science fiction, especially space opera reader. I like visiting new planets to meet new civilizations, but I prefer modern space opera because modern space opera is more focused on characters. I like book that makes me books and author able to make me relate to those characters, relatable persons. I like books with big ideas, but I don't get attached to the story because I don't get attached to the characters. So I loved Isaac Asimov and Foundation when I was really young, because I didn't have my brain was not trained to understand the difference between different genres and different way to tell a story. So I was fascinated by those huge concepts, but there's not a lot of character development in those books, barely anything. So I like stories like The Expanse, for example, because the character work there is amazing. Same thing is about fantasy. I like fantasy books, but I prefer when they have a huge character development component. So stuff like Realm of the Elderlings by Robinoff, it's top notch. I'm not an extremely plot driven reader. I like when story they have huge plot twist, when everything comes together nicely in the end, but that's not what really matters for me. Of course, I am a wow person, someone that says, "Whoa, that's cool," when it actually happens, or when an author pulls the rug from under your feet and gives you that shocking moment where everything changes. I like that when where like everybody else, but I prefer when the focus is clearly on characters. So. And being that much of an empathetic person, as I told you before in one of the earlier questions, I try to be very careful and try to document myself and go and search for all the trigger warnings that authors and publishers put on those books, because I'm really impressionable. Impressionable. I can really be affected by the books I read. So that's why I shy away from grimdark and horror novels and all the rest. I don't like huge explosion of gore. I don't like when someone is going... I know that Booktube is going to censor a few words, so I don't know if I can say a few things. But you know grimdark, right? If you don't know grimdark, go and Google it. But that kind of violence and hyper-violence, that's not for me, man. I can't stomach it. So, yeah, I like books that have a huge scope and a huge world building, of course, but I prefer books that have really fleshed out characters with a clear arc, people that change during the duration of the book. That's the kind of book I love. So of course, science fiction, space opera, I like battleship, I like fighting between the stars, I like huge words and dragon and all the rest, but characters, they come first. If you want to suggest me something like that, books in that kind of niche genre with extremely character driven, put all of your suggestions in the comments below. And the last question is, what does your collection look like? I'm going to show you actually. So this is most of my collection. You will find on your left there my indie books collection. We have Van Zangari, we have Digman and Roddy, we have Mark Simmony, M.L. Spencer, Thomas Howard Riley, Christopher Russell, J.D.R. Rosell, Jim Wilburn, Benjamin J. Ryan, T.A. Bruno, and then we have Joshua Scott Edwards. That's my indie book stuff. Then we have traditionally published book here, most of them fantasy. And science fiction, I have my collection with The Wheel of Time. I just got the first binding down there, something YA from Victoria Bayard. I managed to finally buy a book from Ali Modestit. I'm pretty pumped about it. And then Mistborn, Crooked Kingdom, Sam Hoke, something from Brody and Rindell, Mary Pearson, Scott Drakeford, then Matthew Ward with that trilogy there, the Expanse trilogy, R.S. Ford, David Dalglish, Robin Hobb, then we have R.J. Barker, then we have Christoph and Kaufman, we have Brian D. Alderson. The only books that are not science fiction or fantasy are from Maureen Johnson. It's a murder mystery series, which is amazing. Then on my right here, on your right, I have my books translated in Italian. You may recognize here the Stormlight Archives, and then something from Juliette Marillier, and slightly out of frame, Fonzali with the Jade War trilogy, then Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which has been translated in English too, Ursula K. Le Guin. In Italy we have a bind-up with the whole Lunar Chronicle, 5 or 6 book in 2 bind-up. I missed the first one. Then I'm reading the Lifelike trilogy by J. Christoph. I still missed the first 2 book from Gideon the Ninth trilogy. Sight by Neil Schusterman. Then we have James Islington here. We have Too Much Light. You cannot see the titles there, but this is The Shadow of What Was Lost, I think it was in English. And then you have indie books in Italian, and my books that you eventually will be able to read if you want in English. And that's it. That's my physical book library. There is another lever down there, but I don't want to move the camera or otherwise I will not be able to put it in the right place anymore. But yes, I have more science fiction fantasy books. I have the 100 Quartet and a few other books from Megan Wallen Turner and more. It's nice, isn't it? Yes! So that's all. That's all I've got for you today. And thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed get to know me a little bit better, consider subscribing to this channel, leave a like. And if you want to follow my journey, my writing journey and my reading journey, you can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. You'll find all the links and connection in the description box. I hope to see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.